All right, hello again, YouTube, and I'm going to read this passage again. This work, Fear and Trembling, is Kierkegaard's discourse on Abraham and his discourse on faith. And here is a moment where he tries to get at what faith is by describing what he imagines the person of faith, or he actually uses the term knight of faith. And contrasts it to the night of infinite resignation. But I'm just going to read the night of faith part. And Kierkegaard, by the way, conceives of himself as a night of infinite resignation. He explicitly says, I can't make the movements of faith, is how he puts it. So he's describing someone who can make the movements of faith and what that might look like. And I think it's a really just beautiful passage, and I'd like to share it. I candidly admit that in my practice, I have not found any reliable example of the knight of faith, though I would not therefore deny that every second man may be such an example. I have been trying, however, for several years to get on the track of this, and all in vain. People commonly travel around the world to see rivers and mountains, new stars, birds of rare plumage, queerly deformed fishes, ridiculous breeds of men. They abandon themselves to the bestial stupor which gapes at existence, and they think that they have seen something. This does not interest me. But if I knew where there was such a knight of faith, I would make a pilgrimage to him on foot, for this prodigy interests me absolutely. I would not let go of him for an instant. Every moment I would watch to see how he managed to make the movements. I would regard myself as secured for life, and would divide my time between looking at him and practicing the exercises myself, and thus would spend all my time admiring him. As was said, I have not found any such person, but I can well thank him. Here he is. Or I can well think him, Here he is. Acquaintance made, I am introduced to him. The moment I set eyes on him, I instantly push him from me. I myself leap backwards. I clasp my hands and say half aloud, "Good Lord, is this the man? Is it really he? Why, he looks like a tax collector." However, it is the man after all. I draw closer to him, watching his least movements, to see whether there might not be visible a little heterogeneous, fractional, telegraphic message from the infinite. A glance, a look, a gesture, a note of sadness, a smile, which betrayed the infinite in its heterogeneity with the finite. No! I examine his figure from tip to toe, to see if there might not be a cranny through which the infinite was peeping. No! He is solid through and through. His tread, it is vigorous, belonging entirely to finiteness. No smartly dressed townsman who walks out to Fresburg on a Sunday afternoon treads the ground more firmly. He belongs entirely to the world, no Philistine more so. One can discover nothing of that aloof and superior nature whereby one recognizes the night of the infinite. He takes delight in everything, and whenever one sees him taking part in a particular pleasure, he does it with the persistence which is the mark of the earthly man, whose soul is absorbed in such thing. He tends to his work, so when one looks at him, one might suppose that he's a clerk who had lost his soul in an intricate system of bookkeeping. So precise is he. He takes a holiday on Sunday. He goes to church. No heavenly glance or any other token of the incommensurable betrays him. If one did not know him, it would be impossible to distinguish him from the rest of the congregation, for his healthy and vigorous hymn-singing proves at the most that he has a good chest. In the afternoon, he walks to the forest. He takes delight in everything he sees, in the human swarm, in the new omnibuses, in the water of the Sound. When one meets him on the beach rows, one might suppose he was a shopkeeper taking his fling. That's just the way he disports himself, for he is not a poet, and I've sought in vain to detect in him the poetic incommensurability. Toward the evening he walks home. His gait is indefatigable. I don't know how to pronounce that. As that is of the postman. On his way, he reflects that his wife has surely a special little warm dish prepared for him. For example, a calf's head, roasted, garnished with vegetables. If he were to meet a man like-minded, he could continue as far as the east gate to discourse with him about that dish, with a passion befitting a hotel chef. As it happens, he hasn't 4 pence to his name, and yet he fully and firmly believes that his wife has that dainty dish for him. If she had it, it would then be an invidious sight for superior people, and an inspiring one for the plain man to see him eat. For his appetite is greater than Esau's. His wife hasn't it, strangely enough, and it is quite the same to him. On the way he runs across another man. They talk together for a moment. In the twinkling of an eye, he erects a new building. He has at his disposition all the powers necessary for it. The stranger leaves him with the thought that he certainly was a capitalist, while my admired knight thinks, yes, if the money were needed, I dare say I could get it. He lounges at an open window and looks out on the square on which he lives. He's interested in everything that goes on. In a rat which slips under the curb, in the children's play, in this with the nonchalance of a girl of 16. And yet he is no genius, for in vain I have sought in him the incommensurability of genius. In the evening he smokes his pipe. To look at him, one would swear it was a grocer over the way, vegetating in the twilight. He lives as carefree as a ne'er-do-well, and yet buys up the acceptable time at the dearest price. For he does not do the least thing except by virtue of the absurd. And yet I could become furious over it, for envy, if no other reason. Because the man has made and is making every instant the movements of infinity. With infinite resignation, he has drained the cup of life's profound sadness. He knows the bliss of the infinite. He senses the pain in renouncing everything, the dearest things he possesses in the world, and yet finite tastes to him just as good as to one who never knew anything higher. For his continuance in the finite did not bear a trace of the cowed and fearful spirit produced by the process of training. And yet he has this sense of security in enjoying it, as though the finite life were the surest thing of all. And yet the whole earthly form he exhibits is a new creation by virtue of the absurd. He resigned everything infinitely, and then he grasped everything again by virtue of the absurd. He is constantly making the movements of infinity, but he does this with such correctness and assurance that he constantly gets the finite out of it, and there is not a second where he has a notion of anything else. It's supposed to be the most difficult task for a dancer to leap into a definite posture in such a way that there is not a second when he is grasping after the posture. But by that leap itself he stands fixed in that posture. Perhaps no dancer can do it. This is what the knight does. Most people live dejectedly in worldly sorrow and joy. There are the ones who sit along the wall and do not join the dance. The knights of infinity are dancers and possess elevation. They make the movements upward and fall down again. This is too no mean pastime, nor ungrateful to behold. But whenever they fall down, they are not able at once to assume the posture. They vacillate an instant, and this vacillation shows that after all, they are strangers in the world. This is the night of infinite resignation he's talking about. This is the more or less strikingly evident in proportion to the art they possess. But even the most artistic knights cannot altogether conceal this vacillation. One need not look at them when they are up in the air. but only in the instant they have touched the ground, then one recognizes them. But to be able to fall down in such a way that the same second it looks as if one were standing and walking, to transform the leap of life into a walk, absolutely to express the sublime and the pedestrian, that only these knights can do. And this is the one and only prodigy. So that's his description of the person of faith. I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful passage. So please respond with your favorite passage or your favorite work from a theological perspective. And if you can't, in some way this is the challenge. If you can't do this, I feel like there's something lacking in your atheism, or something lacking in your Christianity if you can't do it the other way. So thank you, and have a good day.